My family left me out of everything, so I gave them exactly what they deserved. They forgot my birthday. Not just forgot to call, forgot entirely. I found out because my neighbor, a woman, I waved to across the fence maybe twice a week, knocked on my door that evening with a small cake. I saw it on the community board. She said, "Happy birthday, Walter." I stood in my doorway holding that cake, and I thought about my 3 children. I had 2 daughters-in-law, my son-in-law, and my 4 grandchildren, all of them within 30 minutes of this house. Not one of them called. That was the moment. I stopped waiting for things to get better on their own and started deciding what I was actually going to do about it. My name is Walter. I'm 69 years old. I spent my entire working life as a high school history teacher, 31 years in the same building, teaching the same subject, because I believed that understanding where you came from was the foundation of understanding anything at all. Ironic, isn't it? My wife Carol passed 7 years ago. Breast cancer. She went in 11 months, which the doctor said was fast. But I can tell you from the inside, it wasn't fast. Not even slightly. Carol was the center of this family. She organized everything, remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every small thing that made each person feel seen. She sent cards. She made phone calls. She kept track when she died. I think everyone assumed I would step into that role, or perhaps they assumed someone else would. Nobody did. Within 2 years of losing Carol, the family gatherings began to thin. Thanksgiving went from 30 people at my house to a casual thing at my eldest son Raymond's place, where I was invited but never quite consulted. Christmas shifted to my daughter Patrice's home, where Sandra's family, her husband's side, increasingly dominated the room. My youngest, Kevin, lives 40 minutes away, and I see him perhaps 4 times a year. I told myself this was normal, that families evolve, that adult children have their own lives and their own gravitational pulls. I made myself believe it for 5 years. Then came the summer reunion. Every year, Carol used to organize a family summer gathering at the lake house, a property I still own, that I maintain, that has been in my family for decades. After she passed, I kept the tradition going myself. I sent the invitations. I bought the food. I opened the house. This past spring, I sent the usual message to the family group chat. Lake House is open last weekend of July. Looking forward to seeing everyone. The responses were slow. Scattered Raymond said he'd try to make it work. Patrice said they had a lot going on. Kevin didn't respond at all. The last weekend of July came. I drove to the lake house Friday afternoon and opened it up, aired it out, bought groceries for 12 people. By Saturday evening, I was still alone. No calls explaining, no apologies, nothing. I sat on the dock and watched the sun go down over water that Carol used to love. In a place that used to overflow with the noise of people I raised, and the silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. When I got home from the lake, I didn't call anyone. I didn't send an angry message to the group chat. I simply started paying attention, really paying attention the way I used to pay attention in the classroom, when I could tell a student wasn't telling me the whole story. Discovery 1. The visual clue. My grandchildren are on social media. I joined a few years back just to keep up with them. I'm not very active, but I check in. That August, about 2 weeks after the empty lake house, I was scrolling through and I stopped cold. My granddaughter Ellie, Raymond's youngest, 16 years old, had posted a series of photographs, a family barbecue, a big one, tables outside, fairy lights, the whole thing. Raymond and his wife, Patrice, and her husband, Kevin, who lives 40 minutes away and couldn't respond to a text, standing there with a drink in his hand, laughing, all for grandchildren. Everyone, the caption said Summer Fam. I looked at the date, the same weekend as the lake house. They had planned a separate gathering at Raymond's house. On the exact same weekend, I had opened the lake house and waited alone. I set my phone down on the table. I picked it back up. I looked at the photo again, carefully. because I needed to be absolutely sure I was seeing what I was seeing. I was. I didn't sleep well that night. Not from anger, although there was anger. From grief, mostly. The particular grief of realizing something has been true for a long time, and you were simply the last to know. Discovery. 2. The financial clue. Now, here is where it gets important. I am not a wealthy man, but I am a careful one, Carol, and I lived modestly and saved consistently. And what I have, the house, the lake property, a reasonable retirement, I have because of 40 years of deliberate choices. My children know this. We've had general conversations over the years about the future, about the property, about what things might look like eventually. About 3 months before the birthday incident, Raymond had called me one of his rare calls and steered the conversation toward the lake house. He was casual about it, almost too casual. Have you thought about what you want to do with the lake property long term, Dad? It's a lot to maintain on your own. I said, I managed fine. Sure. Just, if you ever wanted to think about restructuring things, maybe putting it in a family trust or something. Kevin and Patrice and I would be happy to be involved in that conversation. I said I'd think about it. At the time, it felt like practical concern. After the barbecue photos, it felt like something else. I called my attorney, a man named Philip, who had handled Carol's estate and who I trusted with the kind of blunt honesty that most people avoid. I laid it out for him. The lake house, Raymond's comment, pattern of the past 2 years. He listened. Then, he said, Walter, have you updated your estate documents since Carol passed? Not comprehensively, I admitted. Think, he said carefully, that now would be a very good time to do that, and to be very intentional about it. I went to his office the following week. We spent 2 hours going through everything, and I made some changes, intentional ones. Discovery 3, the behavioral clue. My neighbor, the one with the birthday cake, kind woman named Dorothy, turns out to be friendly with Raymond's wife, Christine. Not close friends, but the kind of neighbors who chat across driveways. Dorothy, to her credit, came to me directly. She sat in my kitchen one afternoon and looked at me the way people look at you when they're about to say something they've been working up to. Walter, she said, I don't want to get into anyone's business, but I think you should know something. Christine had mentioned more than once, apparently, across various conversations, that the family found it difficult to include me in things, that I was stuck in the past, that gatherings at my house felt heavy because of Carol, that it was easier to do things separately. Easier. That was the word. Not kinder. Not better for the family. Not healthier. Easier. I thanked Dorothy. I walked her to the door. I stood in my hallway for a long moment after she left, and something shifted in me, cleanly, quietly, permanently. Not into bitterness. I want to be clear about that. Into clarity. I had spent 7 years making myself smaller so that my presence wouldn't make things difficult. Waiting to be included, accepting less and less, while telling myself it was just how families evolved. I had been so afraid of being a burden that had allowed myself to be treated as one. That ended the day I stood in that hallway. I did not call a family meeting. I did not send a long, emotional message to the group chat. I did something much more considered. I invited each of my 3 children separately to lunch, one at a time, at a restaurant of my choosing. Over 3 consecutive weeks, I told each of them the same thing when I called. I'd like to have lunch with you. Just us. There are some things I want to share with you. All 3 said yes, which told me something. I had lunch with Kevin first. He was uncomfortable from the moment we sat down, fidgeting with his menu, talking too much about nothing. Kevin has always been the one who feels guilt the most visibly. I let him talk for a while. Then I set my menu down and looked at him. Kevin, the lake house. Last July. What happened? He looked at his water glass. Dad. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I just want the truth. For once, I'd like the actual truth from one of my children. A long pause. Raymond organized something at his place. Christine didn't want it. Just kinda happened that it was the same weekend. Nobody really thought about. Nobody thought about me, I said. He didn't answer. That's the truth, Kevin. Nobody thought about me. And I need you to just say that, so we can both stop pretending otherwise. He looked up. Nobody thought about you, he said quietly. And that was wrong. I nodded. Double quotes. Thank you, I said. That's all I needed. Lunch with Patrice was sharper. Patrice has her mother's directness, but not her mother's warmth. And she came to that lunch with her defenses already arranged. She talked about how hard it was managing everything with her husband's family, her own schedule, the kids' activities. She talked about how gatherings at my house always felt like a lot. I let her finish. Then I said, Patrice, do you know what I did the weekend of the lake house? Dad, we've talked about I bought groceries for 12 people. I aired out every room, sat on that dock until dark on Saturday. Alone, she was quiet. And 2 weeks later, I found out from your niece's social media that everyone was together at Raymond's house that same weekend. The quiet stretched. That wasn't planned to exclude you, she said finally. Her voice had lost some of its armor. Maybe not, I said. But the result was the same. Lunch with Raymond was the one I had prepared for most carefully. Raymond is the eldest. He's organized, strategic, and used to being the one who frames the narrative. He came in warm and confident, ordered generously, asked about my health. I let him settle. Then I said, Raymond, you asked me about the lake property a few months ago, about restructuring it into a family trust. Just thinking ahead, Dad. Being practical. I've been thinking ahead too, I said. Spent quite a bit of time with Philip recently, actually. Updating everything. Something shifted behind his eyes. I've made some significant changes. Took a sip of my coffee. I've established a charitable remainder trust for the lake property. Hey, local land conservation organization will manage it during my lifetime and receive it afterward. Keeps the property protected, gives me a nice tax arrangement, and ensures it's used the way Carol would have wanted. Raymond set his fork down. Kaz, we talked about that property being kept in the family. You talked about it, I said. Listened. And then I made my own decision. The way I am entitled to do with something that belongs to me. That's, you should have consulted Raymond. My voice was calm. Completely calm. You didn't consult me when you planned a family gathering on the same weekend I opened the lake house. You didn't consult me when your wife told the neighborhood I was too difficult to include. You didn't consult me when my birthday passed without a single phone call from any of my children. He had no answer. I love you, I said. I love all three of you. But I am done arranging my life around people who treat my presence as optional, okay? And I am done making financial and personal decisions based on what I imagine you might want. When? You've made it very clear that my wants are not part of your calculations. The restaurant noise continued around us, ordinary and indifferent. Raymond looked at the table for a long moment. When he looked up, something in his face was different. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten, he said. I know, I said, a toss. Actually, the part that hurt the most. Things didn't fix themselves overnight. That's not how real life works, okay? And I won't pretend otherwise. But things changed. Measurably. Actually, Kevin started calling on Sundays. Not every Sunday, but most. Sometimes just for 10 minutes. Times longer. It was imperfect and real, and I valued it more than I could say. Patrice came to visit in October. Just her, without the husband, without the agenda. We sat in Carol's garden and talked for 3 hours. Real talking, the kind we hadn't done in years. She apologized. Not in a big, dramatic way, in a quiet, direct way that I recognized as genuine. I accepted it. Raymond took longer. Raymond always takes longer. He's the kind of man who processes things in private before he can address them in person. I've known that about him his whole life. He called me in November. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said at lunch. I figured you had been, I said. You were right about all of it. And I think Christine and I have been doing things in a way that wasn't fair to you. I'm not going to make excuses for it. Appreciate that, Raymond. Is there any way back from this for the family? I thought about that. There's always a way, I said, but it has to be built on something honest, not convenience, not what's easier, something real. Okay, he said. Okay, I said back. I drove to the lake house once more before winter closed it down for the season. I stood on the dock, the same dock where I'd sat alone in July, watching the sun go down, and I looked out at the water. It looked the same. The water doesn't change because of what happens on the shore. But I was different standing there. I had spent 7 years shrinking, making myself quieter, less demanding, less present, because I was afraid that needing things from people who loved me would make me a burden. What I learned is that the people who truly love you don't experience your presence as a burden. And the people who do, that's information worth having. The lake property is still in the Conservation Trust. I have no regrets about that, but I've made other arrangements for the house, for other assets that reflect relationships as they actually are, rather than as I used to wish they were. Not punitive, not strategic, just honest. This past birthday, Raymond called at 7 in the morning. Patrice called at noon. Kevin showed up at my door at 3 in the afternoon with a terrible store-bought cake and a card. My grandchildren had signed. It wasn't elaborate. It was just present. Actually, present. Dorothy came by later. She saw the cars in the driveway and smiled at me over the fence. Better than last year? She asked. Considerably, I said. Here is what I want to leave you with. Being excluded by the people you love is one of the loneliest experiences a person can have. 'Cause it isn't the absence of strangers. It's the absence of the people who are supposed to see you. But here is what I know.